Good evening. We can live a long, long time in an atmosphere of meditation without being so completely elevated on cloud nine that we forget to keep our feet on the ground. We can live right in an atmosphere that we are in now, this atmosphere of meditation, and still keep our feet on the ground. And the way of that is this. Why should we keep our feet on the ground? Because the Word must become flesh. Living in a dream world, separate and apart from the everyday world, would be no proof of God's government in our daily experience. If we had to leave our daily experience for God's universe, that is, some universe separate and apart from this, there would be no practical value to a spiritual teaching. But the point is that it is necessary for us to live in an atmosphere of meditation and yet find it practical in our daily affairs. For instance, we have been taking up this subject of neither good nor evil. And this subject has in the past misled people into living lives of asceticism, that is, the giving up type of life, giving up normal human affairs, going off into monasteries or convents or holy mountains. And that is not the type of spiritual living which was brought down to us from the Master, or which we intend to see made manifest on earth. Not that there aren't those souls who must retire from the human scene for such living. That always will be, for there are those whose entire work lies on the inner plane rather than on the outer. But that is so only that the spiritual guidance of the within can be made manifest and practical to those living the normal daily lives. When we say there is neither good nor evil, let us see that now in the way in which it is meant in this infinite way teaching. Today, from Hawaii, came these two beautiful flower leis. And they are beautiful. They're beautiful in color and form and grace and perfume. They're beautiful in their symbology of God's beauty translated into human terms. And yet we say they are neither good nor evil. And you say, I can see that they are not evil, but in what sense are they not good? In the sense that the good is not embodied in them and never can be. The good is in the consciousness of the individual who sent them, because the good is love. Love is good. Love is invisible, spiritual. Love is the substance that sent these across the 2,500 miles of ocean. Love, gratitude, devotion, call it what you will, it is an invisible thing, and it is the good of which these are the visible expression. Now, if we were to call these good, and then in 3 or 4 days they fade and are gone, we have lost our good. Oh no, that isn't true at all. It makes no difference what happens to these. The only value that these have outside of a momentary sense of pleasure is in the immortal and eternal remembrance of the giver, of the love that prompted it, of the devotion, of the friendship, of the gratitude. Now, when these are long since gone and forgotten, the good, the love, the appreciation will remain. And that part of this will be immortal and will create a bond always between the giver and the recipient, a bond of the invisible that can never break regardless of what happens to this. That is why there need never be grief if a person loses a ring or an earring or a watch or something else that they have held of value, because you must sooner or later see that that thing had no value regardless of how much money it may have cost. The value was in that which was invisible, that which prompted its coming into your experience. And so you see that when you live in the realization that good is invisible, it is never visible. You never can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell that which is good, because good is invisible. Good is intangible to human sense. Good is something you discern with your spiritual sense. Then when you learn that, these things in the outer realm come and go and come and go, and there never is an end to them. Never is an end to them if your vision is on the source of them. Whereas if your vision is on the thing itself, it may go and you never get another, because you've placed your soul, your thought, your gratitude in the thing instead of in the consciousness which underlies it. So it is. When we say a thing is neither good nor evil, we mean just that. This is not good or evil, but it's beautiful and harmonious and graceful, colorful, and filled with perfume, and therefore good to have, but not good itself. The good is in the consciousness of the giver, in the same way that we could go behind your garden and say that your garden isn't good, it's beautiful and wonderful to have. It isn't the good. The good is in the soul of the individual who plants and nurtures and brings it forth, and of course in the soul of God, which causes it to grow. Always translate or transmute what you see, and be sure that you do not place your value in the thing or in the person, but always in the invisible love or gratitude or soul that lies behind that vision. Then, when you are confronted with an erroneous appearance, you can also say, this is not good, but this is not bad, because it has no qualities. The good lies in the invisible soul of man, which is God. And the realization of that dispels even the appearance that we call evil. The whole of the spiritual life is lived in the ability to see behind the visible scene. The materialistic life sees what it believes what it sees, believes what it can handle and touch. That is the material side of life. That is the side of life that has fooled men into believing that if they just had this sum of money, that they would have happiness and peace and joy and contentment, or if they had this much fame or name, that it would provide something, and then in every case they find when they achieve it that they have missed the way, that it wasn't what they sought, that it didn't buy them what they were seeking, nor provide it for them. And then comes the experience of searching for the real things of life. The real things of life are the invisible things. When we meet each other this way, it is always wisdom to know that the soul of you and the soul of man, the soul of me, these meet in a spiritual relationship of harmony and peace and grace. And then you find that these relationships not only are permanent, but they are mutually beneficial. Whereas if we look to each other humanly, we will ultimately be disappointed. It is only in the realization that God is the soul of man, and that the soul of man is the source of his good, that we find freedom from bondage to the material way of life, the material things of life, and the material mode of life. This question has to do, and incidentally, if you have any questions, please write them out and place them on this table. This has to do with a book, The Mysteries of Genesis, by Mr. Fillmore, and it is a book with which I am not at all familiar, but I did read the pages indicated, and I will say this to you: no, that is not the story of Genesis as it is meant in this work. I would like you to see clearly this point of Genesis, of which I'm talking, because I know nothing about etheric worlds or etheric bodies or anything other than what we're dealing with every day. And so when I speak of the first and second chapter of Genesis, I'm not speaking of two different worlds or two different bodies or two different universes, but two different concepts of the same universe. In other words, since God is the only creator, there can only be one creation. Man never created anything any more than we created cities here last night. We did not create cities in our meditation. We closed our eyes and built a city within us, but it wasn't a city. It was a mental image. So you can't say today that we're architects and builders and constructors of cities, because we're no such thing. All we did was make a mental image. And so it is that we, in the second chapter of Genesis, have built a mental image of body, and we're looking at it and thinking this is it. Whereas we cannot even see this body. This body is not visible to you or to me. The only thing we are witnessing is our concept of this body. But it isn't this body. You will see this body when you have been able, in some measure, to cease judging good and evil from appearances. You will even see the Christ man. You won't have to have second vision, and you won't have to rise into some other state of consciousness. But every time you go to the grocer, the butcher, or the baker, and do business with a clerk, you will be seeing the Christ man. Every time you go into your home or your church or your business, you will be seeing the Christ man, and you will not have to have any other vision than you have now except one. You will have to be released from beholding good and evil, so that when you look out here, you behold a person, but a person without qualities, a person without the qualities of good or evil, a person whom within yourself you know has the soul of God, the mind of God, the Spirit of God. Now, perhaps this explains to you many times when you're speaking to me about problems and I seem to be ignoring you. I'm really not ignoring you. Sometimes I'm sure some of you think that I'm even rude to you. And I really am not. I am not aware at all of what's going on as a part of this human identity, because I can see through you. Without any other eyes than these, I can see you as a person. But you to me are a person without qualities. I know that your real qualities are God qualities, whether or not you're manifesting them, whether or not you're bringing them through at the present moment. I have had the experience of this because of my prison work, during which time I learned never to see a prisoner, never to see a man who was a sinner, a thief, or whatever he may have been in prison for, and I never did. To me, they were men sitting there, the same as you are men and women sitting here. And I don't go back to ask their human history any more than I ask to know your human history. I see you all as persons, and I know what constitutes you, sometimes more than you know it yourself, because you are not yet bringing yourself into expression, because you're still playing around with that human identity that you've become acquainted with, which you think is made up partly good and partly bad and partly indifferent. But that isn't you at all. That is a you which has been made in your mind, formed in your mind by some prenatal experience, by the environment in your early home life, in your childhood, in your school days, and then later in your personal experience out in the world. All of that has formed a you which isn't you at all. It is like trying to call John Barrymore Hamlet. It's nonsensical. He isn't. He has merely built himself a character, and he has placed the costume upon his body and a mask upon his face, and he says to you, I'm Hamlet. But he isn't at all. He's still John Barrymore. And perhaps if you were a child going to the theater for the first time, you'd really think Mr. Hamlet was up there on the stage. As an adult, you know better, and you know that the very moment the final curtain goes down, that all that comes off and Mr. Barrymore is in evidence. And so it is. I know that you and I have human traits, some good, some bad, some indifferent, some we like in each other and some we dislike in each other, but I also know that isn't you. That's the mask that you have built up since birth, that is your presentation of yourself to the world, because that's the part you're playing for one reason or another. But if you could lay that aside, if there was such a thing as curtain call, and you could go to your dressing room and wash that all off, you would see yourself as I see you, as a person with qualities of God, not your qualities, no good qualities that you can lay claim to. No, you are not spiritual and you are not perfect as you've been taught in metaphysics. You're none of those things. You're a person. But God is good, and God constitutes that person which you are. And God is good, and God is love, and God is life, and God is intelligence, and all of this is made evident and manifest as you. Now, you will not have to have any visions to behold Christ. You will not have to have any what we call experiences to behold the Christ. You will not have to have any experiences to go back to the first chapter of Eden. The first chapter of Genesis, and live in Eden. And the reason is that you can be in Eden right here on earth, in this very body, in the very home you're occupying, in the very position you're occupying, the very moment you overcome the knowledge of good and evil, or let us say in proportion, because you don't even have to wait until you've made the complete demonstration to find that you can be living in Eden right here and today, but it will be proportionate to your ability to look out and behold person, and then not slap qualities onto them, not immediately tag them as good or bad, or just or unjust, or kind or unkind, but see them as person. Then, when you hear all these tales of woe, and somebody's bound eventually to call you hard-hearted, you don't believe it. It doesn't ring true, because you are seeing a person devoid of qualities of good and evil, just a person, as if you were seeing a person you'd never met in your life and didn't know their human history. So you could form no opinion, and you just know them as a person. Unfortunately, in these days, you might think of yourself as a psychologist and start to judge from their appearance as to what they are. And of course, some of you may remember that experiment in one of the magazines, national magazines, a few years ago, when they had on one page the photographs of about 20 very prominent men, and on the other page the photographs of 20 criminals, and or had them mixed up, and you were supposed to pick which were the famous ones and which were the criminals. And of course, the average was that we picked 50-50, and we called half of the criminals the great ones and half the great ones criminals. That's the way it came out. Nobody can judge by appearances what anyone else may be, for the thing is that it just doesn't work out that way. And if you are in the spiritual life, it is even more important that you stop trying to look at a person's face and judge what kind of a person they are, for this reason, that what you see is reflected back to you in your experience. The bread that you cast on the waters comes back to you. And if you are seeing evil in somebody's face, or if you are seeing corruption, that is what eventually will come back into your experience. That is why the suspicious person is more subject to robbery and deception than the open one. The open one, who trusts everybody, may have advantage taken of them once in a while, but no comparison to what happens to the suspicious person who's always on their guard. Now, the safe way is not to be human and judge good or evil by appearance, and certainly not to be metaphysical and look at everybody and say you are spiritual and you are good and you are perfect. That way lies trouble too, because it isn't true. You aren't any of those things. You're just usurping a prerogative or quality which belongs to God. Why callest thou me good? There is none good save the Father in heaven. But when you can look at everybody in this world impersonally and impartially and realize you are a person, you are a person, and then go back to the realization that the invisible you is the very Christ. God constitutes your being. Then you'll find whether or not the person themselves is living up to that estimate of themselves. You, at least, are benefiting by your spiritual perception. Be careful. Do not give qualities of good to anyone. I have heard some of the old types of metaphysical practice wherein people went around saying you are spiritual and you are perfect and so forth and so on. And it would be very sad if that's what spirituality looks like and acts like. But it isn't true. You aren't spiritual. You aren't perfect. You aren't good. You are person. You are an individual. And what you really are is all that God is. All that God is, you are. All that the Father hath is yours. So instead of using the word you, go back to the word God. See what it is that God is, and then realize that's what person is. Because God, the invisible, appears outwardly as God the visible. God the Father and God the Son, these are one. And now, when we have taken from you all personality, and as you know, persona comes from the word mask. There's your theatrical mask. Every personality is a mask hiding one's true identity. And so it is, when you've taken that personality away from yourself and realized, whatever God is, I am. All that the Father hath is mine. I and the Father are one. Thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me. Do you not see how you are taking away the mask of human personality with its good and bad and beautiful and unbeautiful and poor and rich and down and up and high and low? All of that disappears when you begin to realize here is individual being, God expressing its perfection and its harmony. And the mere fact that you may be looking at a person and then the next minute they steal a wallet doesn't change the fact. They have not yet come into the awareness of their true identity. Although you may be assured of this, that many times by beholding the world in this light, they become transformed. We have had that experience in our classwork of two events in which young girls leaving our classes at night came into close contact with men who were intoxicated. And merely by the realization of this truth of God as individual being, in both of those cases witnessed the men become sober, and both acknowledged it, even though they didn't know consciously that somebody was praying for them. Invisibly, they knew it. Now, you'd be surprised how many people are subject to this spiritual knowing, even when you yourself do not realize they are subject unto it. That's why we owe it, not only to ourselves, but we owe it to the world to know our neighbor as we would be known by our neighbor. And what is it, do you think, that would, in the light of what I know, what is it, do you think, that would make me happiest? And that is if everyone in every class were not to ascribe qualities of good or evil to me, or not to think about my human history, past, present, or future, but would be able to look at me as person and then say, God is the soul of this individual, God is the mind, the intelligence, God is that which is pouring itself through. That's what I would like. And I'm sure if you should consciously have the experience of someone beholding you in that light, that never again would you want anything finer. You might think at first that that's being too impersonal, but it isn't. It's really being, shall we say, truthful. It is beholding you in the reality that you really are. God constitutes your being. God is the very life and mind and soul of us. When we meet that way, we meet as Christ. when Peter was enabled to say, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God," it was because he was able to look through the human appearance and see what it was that animated Jesus, that made him a Savior, that made him a world leader, that made him whatever it is he was then and has since become. He discerned that not by any outer signs, because the outer signs indicated that he was a carpenter and the son of a carpenter and the son of our neighbor Mary and a rabbi in the Hebrew church. That's what the outer signs testified to. And if you would judge him outwardly, that's about the best you could say. Well, he's our neighbor Mary's son and a good carpenter, probably a good man, and he's going to make a good rabbi. That's what the outer senses would testify to. But if you had the spiritual discernment, you would have been able to see through that appearance and know that Christ was really functioning his life. Yes, but let me tell you this, that if we stopped at beholding Jesus that way, we would lose our demonstration. Because it isn't only Jesus who is functioned by and as the Christ, it is you and me. There isn't a person on the face of the globe of whom it cannot be said, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost. There is not a person on the earth who, in their spiritual identity, is not the child of God. But now watch this. Paul says, you are the man of flesh who cannot please God and who is not governed by God and cannot receive God's government. And that's why it's all wrong metaphysically to go around saying you are spiritual, you are perfect, you are this, that. Because in the human scene that isn't true. The human, when he's in the human world, living a human life, is a man of flesh who is not under God's government and cannot please God, and that's why he's in all this mess that the world is in. What else do you think got him being in this mess? Being a child of God? No, the children of God aren't in this mess. The children of God aren't tangled up in these world troubles. It is the man of flesh who cannot please God and who is not under God's government that is in trouble. But, Paul says, if so be the Spirit of God dwell in you, then do you become the child of God. And so it is that I say to you, you don't go out of this experience, you don't live in a dream world, you don't have experiences of visions of another kind of a world or another kind of a man. You always are the person you are now, but with this difference, that whereas before you were a man of earth, the man of flesh who could not please God because you were living in the world of good and evil. Now, the moment you have renounced the use of your knowledge of good and evil and have said, this is neither good nor evil, this is a person. This is neither good nor evil, this is a condition. This is neither good nor evil, this is a flower. This is neither good nor evil, this is a beautiful painting. This is neither good nor evil, this is a beautiful rug, a beautiful home, a beautiful estate. But it is not good or evil. Why? God alone is good. Then you'll find that you have made the transition from being the man of earth who cannot please God, who is not under the government of God, and you have become the child of God, and all of a sudden you find what the Master found, that there are invisible angels to bear us up. I doubt very much that he meant those invisible angels were flying entities, but I'm sure that he understood that they were the presence that goes before you to make the crooked places straight. I'm sure he meant that it was something operating in consciousness that was one step ahead of you, as the infinite intelligence that knoweth your need before you do, and before you knew you needed it, it brought it to your home. You waked after a good night's sleep, as Elijah did, and found that, although he was hungry, the cakes were being baked on the stones right in front of him, and or ravens were bringing him food. In other words, this invisible selfhood, this divine presence, which is the reality really of your being, that is always a step ahead of you, providing for you, since you need not take thought for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, or wherewithal you shall be clothed, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And the Master used the symbolic terms of, I could call on a host of angels. And I think that that was true, not in our painting sense of angels, but in the sense of a divine presence that is forever guiding us, directing us, leading us, multiplying our loaves and fishes for us. We don't multiply loaves and fishes. Jesus didn't either. Jesus looked to the Father and the fishes were multiplied. I of my own self can do nothing. So you will find that whereas, and that's why in the history of all these people, whether it was back in the days of Leis, whom they say his mother carried in the womb for 70 years so that he was an old man when he was born, or in the case of Buddha, whose mother was spiritually endowed with her son and brought him forth as an immaculate conception, or Jesus, whose mother was spiritually endowed and brought him forth as an immaculate conception, or whether it is John, of whom we know nothing, or whether it is somebody else who has a human history. All of that is nonsense so far as our world is concerned. For the truth of this is this, that in our true identity we're all immaculately conceived. Our inner spiritual being is a child of God, and no human parentage entered into its makeup. And that's why the Master could say, call no man on earth your father. He wasn't speaking of himself, he was speaking of you. Call no man on earth your father, for in your true spiritual identity you are immaculately conceived. You are spiritual and you are perfect. That is, perfection constitutes your being. Now, in spite of that, we have the men and women with human histories that are not spiritually to our liking, and yet in some moment of transition or conversion, their past is wiped out and they are become new. But if you were to look at them, they have the same eyes and the same ears and the same nose and the same mouth, the same arms, the same legs, the same body, and you just cannot see that anything has happened to them, because it happened where? It happened as a transformation of consciousness. And that's where transformation takes place. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so your transformation will take place not by being transformed to some kind of an etheric world or an etheric body, not by being transformed into some kind of a visualized universe. Your transformation will come about by a change of consciousness in which you will agree that I am a person, an individual, and that since God is the creative principle of my being, all that God is I am, all that the Father hath is mine, and then look around and declare that. Not only about your friends and family, spend much more time declaring that about your enemies, because it is too easy to declare it about those we like. And the Master said we have no profit in that. It only benefits us when we can break through seeing those we like and begin to realize that even those whom we like least the same spiritual truth is true of their identity. That's praying for your enemies. Now you see that when this transformation takes place, you will still enjoy your food, and you'll still enjoy your home, and you'll still enjoy all of your human companionships, but the transformation will be such that you may not enjoy the same people, the same companionships. You may not enjoy the same friends. You may not even enjoy some of your own relatives. And that sometimes works a hardship at first. But in the end, everyone on this path has to meet it, because you can only tabernacle with those of your own household, those of your own state of consciousness. And once your interest is in spiritual things, you'll find it very hard to get along with those who are eternally complaining about their body or their pocketbook or their bosses or their neighbors. And you will not be able to live in that kind of an atmosphere. As a matter of fact, even as it is today, you will find that you blossom when you're in an atmosphere like this, where nobody in this room is looking at you and judging whether you're good looking or not, or whether you're rich or poor, or up or down, or high or low, where everyone in this room has come in to here and created an atmosphere of love by virtue of the fact that they're all here for the same purpose, and that is spiritual revelation, spiritual unfoldment. And so you're in an atmosphere now of not being judged by anybody in this room, and therefore you're set free in your own identity. In other words, you can be yourself. You don't have to keep a mask on in here and try to be somebody else or something else, because you know that each one of us here is here for the same purpose, that of receiving spiritual light. And we don't care what each other looks like, or what their home life is, or what their private life is. We are here for one purpose, to share in an unfolding spiritual good. Can you not feel the difference in this room, that you're not being judged, you're not being liked, and you're not being disliked, you're not being drawn on or pulled on, you're not being manipulated mentally, you're being left alone to sit in your chair and enjoy your inner unfoldment with God. And nobody is bothering to like you or dislike you. Nobody is bothering to compliment you or not compliment you. And even when it's over, if someone does mention your beautiful hat or how well you look, you know right well that it is a blossoming out of love rather than the indulging of a personality which may not even be truthful sometimes. So you finally come to a place where you find it uncomfortable to be in any other kind of an atmosphere than this, or to be around those who are looking on you as a human being and knowing all your faults and overplaying perhaps your virtues or neglecting them. And you see, no matter which happens, whether they're overplayed or neglected, you feel badly. And the fact that we all have faults, the more that someone knows them and prods us at them, the worse we feel. And there's no happiness in that. There's no joy in that. The only true joy, and I know you'll feel it this week, is when you're in an atmosphere of people who are not judging you, who are neither hating you or fearing you or loving you, but cooperating with you, uniting with you in a joint worship of God, of truth. And each one beholding Christ as the identity of the other. You'll never miss their human compliments, even if they fail to give them to you, because you'll be feeling what they really feel about you, in feeling that they're beholding your spiritual selfhood. Yes, we have witnessed that even animals, once they have come into living in this atmosphere of spiritual homes and spiritual consciousness, can't live out in the world of human beings anymore. They can't take either the human judgment of good or of evil. They can't take that, even human love. They are in an atmosphere where they're only at home when you're beholding them as they really and really truly are, just a dog. Just a dog with God qualities. And as you see them, that's what they are, and that's what they respond to. And so it is with us. Sometimes we've built up natures that demand that we receive flattery. But when you come into this life, you lose that, and you can't take flattery anymore. You can feel its insincerity, just like you can feel that it isn't true, that you're not worthy or deserving of it. And so you're uncomfortable under flattery. But in the same way, you don't want condemnation and can't take it because you're not entitled to it. No matter what your faults may be, you're not entitled to condemnation. You're entitled to being beheld as neither good nor evil, so that God constitutes your being. And when you are around those that understand that, you're at peace. You're happy. You can work in that atmosphere. You can live in that atmosphere. You can be joyous in that atmosphere. And you watch it in your home, how differently you are held once you release the members of your household, from the birds and animals on up to the humans. Watch what happens when you release them from the burden of being good or evil. Watch what happens with all of them when you release the humans from obligation, from the feeling they must do this because of the relationship, or you're entitled to this because of your human rights. When you have released them in the realization, all that God is, I am, all the Father hath is mine, and therefore I need nothing from anyone out here. And you can feel that in this room, that you're not under any bondage. You're not being held in bondage to an obligation or to a debt or to anything else. You're here of your own free will and accord, and you can go anytime that you're ready. And because of that, you have your own sense of freedom, not being held in any bond. We, as those who have received a measure of this light, must first of all release all those around us, so that whatever we do for them, we do for love, not because of duty or obligation, not because it is demanded of us or expected of us, but because it is our nature to fulfill our human relationship on its level. Then, as we do that, you'll find that you are automatically releasing the others in your household, and you're not demanding obedience because it's your child. You're not demanding support because you have a legal right to get it. You have released everyone from human obligation and held them only in this united relationship of love. Then they feel their freedom. And you'd be surprised how, well, you wouldn't be surprised because you know from your own experience how you love to give when it isn't expected of you or demanded of you or held to be a right. You know how much of a joy it is to give in that sense. This thing of being transformed from the man of earth to the man of Christ is not a matter of another universe. This is God's universe. Right here is the Garden of Eden. If so be you yourself can withdraw your praises and condemnations, your judgments of good or evil, you will find that you're living in about as much of a heaven as you will ever want. And I doubt that you'll feel that there ever could be a better place than this very world. This is the world that every visionary has dreamed of attaining. But nobody can attain it while they're under this knowledge of good and evil. It can only come as the fruitage of dropping all judgment, all criticism, all condemnation, and even all praise. Therefore, we may say, this is beautiful, but the good is the invisible love and gratitude that sent it forth flying across those miles of ocean. And so it is with everything else. One time when we were right here in this very room, it took place, we had the lesson with the small figure. I know many of you were here who were here during that lesson. We had the little Burmese Buddha, a little ivory carved Burmese Buddha. And we looked at it to try to find out what was good about it. And each one in the class handled it and looked at it to see what they could find of good about it. But one lady alone saw what was good about it. And she said the love of the artist that went into it. And you see, that was the truth. Behind that figure was nothing but a cold piece of ivory. But behind that figure was a love and a devotion that sent a man into the ivory market to select a perfect piece of ivory. And you can imagine how many pieces he must have looked at and handled and examined before he found one probably that big that was flawless. And then the amount of love and devotion that he must have put into the sharpening of his tools so that they would bring out a perfect piece of work. And the vision he must have had of Christhood that could enable him to bring forth such a beautiful face and beautiful hands as were in that little thing. And as you looked at that figure, it would have been so foolish to stop there and admire a cold piece of ivory with a few cuts in it, whereas the whole secret of that beauty and of grace and form was in an intensity of love and devotion to spiritual things that must have been in that artist. And so there again, there was nothing good about that statue. It was nice to have and beautiful, but nothing good about it. The good was in the consciousness of the artist. So it is. Try to see this, and try to practice seeing what Peter saw when he said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Try to forget the human personality, the human body, the human pocketbook, the human woes and the human virtues, and look behind it and see if you can't realize why this is a person. This is a person, and the reality of them is God. And that realization can awaken them to their true identity and dispel the entire illusion of sense, which is binding them. Everyone is bound by the illusion of sense, but the illusion is made up of the knowledge of good and evil. That's what constitutes the illusion. Nobody is living under the illusion who has in some measure given up the knowledge of good and evil. The illusion for them is broken. It is like the master who still lived on earth but could say, "I have overcome the world." In other words, who did sin? Neither do I condemn thee. What did hinder you? No longer does the world have powers to enslave, because he has seen through to the fact that there are no powers on earth. Even to Pilate, the highest temporal power in that kingdom, "Thou couldst have no power over me unless it came from the Father in heaven." And so it is. We have overcome the world when we have overcome the knowledge of good and evil. We overcome the world in proportion as we overcome this world of good and evil, and the transformation takes place in you. The world out here appears to be the same, except that you don't see it that way anymore. It now has a different light on it. It has a different perspective. It has a different outlook. And yet, if you were to feel, you'd see it's the same bodies in front of you, or the same stores, or the same clerks, or the same husband or wife or child. And yet the whole vision changes the moment you perceive the divine nature of the soul of man. Let us turn for a minute in meditation again. Now, just as, let's use this very experience as an illustration. I had come to the end of whatever it was that was coming through. Now, I could have done one of two things. Just flounder around in my thought looking for an idea to continue with, or stop short and turn within for inspiration and find it. Now, that is the way we go through our lives outside of this room. We can do always one of two things. Either start worrying or thinking or mentalizing or searching around in the brain for something, or we can stop dead short. Say, wait a minute, before the next step, let's see what the next step is, and turn within. Get quiet within. Am I going to find any good or bad in this world? No. Can I make up any good or bad with my mind? No. Is there anything out in this world for me to get? Heavens, no. All right. So now from the within must come that which is to be my fruitage in the without. And so the very moment that I close my eyes that way and go within, I give an opportunity for this which is greater than I, the Father within, the transcendental self, the real self, the Christ self. I give that a chance now to give me the next message, or the next dollar, or the next automobile, whatever it may be, that must come forth. Now, you can flounce around in your mind and worry and stew and fret and try to think. But it isn't going to take you far on the spiritual path. As soon as you've come to the end of whatever you're doing and you want to know what the next step is, don't think. Stop everything. Turn within, because whatever it is you're seeking is going to be found within you, and let it, give it a chance to come through into expression. You see, the substance of everything in the visible universe is in the invisible. Like this man with the painting, with the carving, the ivory carving. He had nothing but a piece of ivory. But in the invisible is this image of spiritual devotion which he calls Buddha. And also within is the gift of carving. And so it must have been that man's art of meditation, his ability to meditate, get quiet within, and let the skill of the within flow through his hands and arms, mind, brain. He must have been able to turn within for inspiration to get just the right smile on there, the right touch. So it is with us. Everything that you hope to achieve in this world has to first be achieved by letting it flow out from the invisible world. The only people who can write books or compose music in the outer world are plagiarists. They can take ideas that already exist and twist them upside down and get something else out of them. But an original writer, a creative writer, or a creative composer turns within, and all of a sudden the melody starts to flow, or the ideas begin to flow from deep down in that within. It isn't always easy, That's why those of creative instinct are apt to be kind of cranky or temperamental, because it isn't easy to break through the layers of the mind. In the mind, you could take music and you could take books and you could twist them all upside down and write some more books and some more music. But to get through that layer to the original creative instinct, that's what's difficult. And that is what causes temperament and temper sometimes in our artists and geniuses. So let's not try to be geniuses, but let at least learn to go within there and let this inner inspiration flow out. And when you're stuck at some stage of your development and don't know what the next step is, don't try to think. Don't try to reason. Don't try to flounder. Go within and get as quiet as you can. There's no good or evil in this outer world, and then let your good come forth. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.